If you're a boxing fan, I'm sure you guys have been hearing about the infamous no running rule. It's a hot topic, a trending topic, and debate on boxing social media within the boxing community. Everybody's talking about it after Devin Haney, Jose Ramirez, and then Canelo versus William Skull. We got some record-breaking numbers in terms of, a low punch output, low punches landed, and low punches thrown. Both guys made history back to back, and I feel like you got a guy like Devin Haney, who's a big name. You have a guy like Canelo, big name, but they produced both of them produced a boring fight, regardless. I understand that Jose Ramirez, he wasn't expected to beat Devin, but Devin definitely didn't make anybody want to see him again. A lot of people I'm talking to don't really want to see Devin Haney. I want to see him fight again, but when I talk to majority of the boxing fans and, people within the industry, nobody wants to see Devin Haney anymore, and it's kind of sad, but it's like, you guys got to give him a break. Like, he had to get his foot back into the door, and I thought, Devin, to an extent, was supposed to do that. I feel like nobody really expected or should have expected Devin to look good coming off a beating from Ryan Garcia. Unfortunately, the whole running, it does play a factor for Devin because Devin had, a lot of excessive movement in his fight. That's why they're talking about the no running rule, because I'm sure Turki Al-Sheikh, to an extent, saw that event and was like, we got to make this more entertaining for the fans, because I think he probably lost a decent amount of money and people weren't happy with the event. And as a result of that, you have a card with Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Rolly Romero, Teofimo Lopez, and then, Devin goes in there and puts on that kind of performance. Obviously a lot of fans aren't going to be happy. And then after that, right after that event, you had Canelo, who, wasn't able to really catch, they talked about Tom and Jerry. Canelo wasn't able to catch William Skull the way he wanted to because Skull was excessively moving as well. And to Skull's credit, moving is part of the sport of boxing, and Canelo isn't the quickest with his feet. Canelo even said, I don't like fighting guys like that. That's the reason why I don't like fighting guys that move around like that. And that just made me think, I'm like, dude, you think Crawford's going to stand right in front of you? That's just another, comparison. But I just feel like Canelo, he doesn't like movers. He doesn't like to fight guys that move and have good footwork, good foot speed, hand speed. Like, we all know that Canelo's not great against pure boxers. And I think that's why Terence Crawford is so confident he's going to beat Canelo, is because, he has the ability to move around the ring. He even said, Crawford said, I don't need to stop him. He said, I just need to win. So I think Crawford's already thinking, I'm not going in there to exchange with Canelo and try to hurt him. I'm exchanging because I do like to fight, but I'm not going to be dumb about it. That's what people are missing. People think Crawford's going to go in there and be reckless. You can't think Crawford's going to be reckless and he's there for a payday. It's going to be one or the other, right? I think it's a balance, like, at the end of the day. I think Crawford's going to punch more than a guy like Charlo did. He's going to be more active and stand in the pocket more than a guy like William Skull did, but he's not going to be over-aggressive and, be somebody like Berlanga where, he exposes himself, makes himself susceptible for a big counter shot from Canelo. He's not going to do that either. He's just too skilled. Canelo hasn't fought anybody of Crawford's caliber. You could argue the same that, Crawford hasn't fought anybody like Canelo, but I mean, guys like Sean Porter, guys like Earl Spence, guys like Gamboa, those guys are like smaller, they're faster. The style that Crawford has to deal with, with Canelo, and it's not the prime version of Canelo. And I'm not trying to take away from Bud, but like, it's not going to surprise me if Crawford beats Canelo, because this isn't Canelo from 5 to 10 years ago where he was faster. He's definitely slowed down a decent amount. And yeah, maybe it sounds like I'm discrediting, if Crawford's able to pull off a win against Canelo, but at the end of the day, I think he should be able to, because Canelo's just not in his prime anymore. He's not the best fighter in the world anymore. I don't even think he's in the top 5 pound for pound, in my opinion, but he's definitely, the cash cow of the sport. People need to understand, just because you're the cash cow of the sport doesn't mean you're a pound for pound top 5 fighter, and Canelo's not top 5 right now in the sport of boxing. That's just facts, but Crawford is, and I think on September 13th, we're going to find out why, because it's not all about size. Obviously it plays a tremendous factor. It plays a major factor being you know, multiple weight classes above Crawford, and Crawford coming up and debuting against a guy like Canelo, of course that matters. That's why we're all interested to see it, right? But also dealing with somebody that's going to come up, and, you know, Canelo's not that much taller, you know, or bigger. You know, Crawford's the taller fighter, but Canelo's not that much bigger than Crawford. So it just makes me think, like, I'm pretty sure Crawford's going to have this fight in the bag, and he's not necessarily going to run to have to do it. But let me know in the comments what you guys think about the no running rule. I don't think Crawford's going to be running against Canelo. It's more directed to guys like Devin that, you know, are a little bit nervous to engage, because ultimately Devin took a lot of punishment in that Ryan Garcia fight, so he just wanted to get his feet wet back into the sport of boxing, you know, get the cobwebs off. And then, you know, I think we'll see better versions of Devin Haney. It's all about, you know, mentally. So we'll see what happens, but thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.